how the economy performed in the first quarter, and then I will answer some of your questions. In the first quarter of 2020, we made great progress in coordinating COVID-19 response and economic and social development, and we saw narrower declines in some of the major economic indicators in March. While in the first quarter, facing the COVID-19 challenge under the strong leadership of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China with Comrade Xi Jinping as the core, all regions and departments strictly implemented the decisions and measures taken by the CPC Central Committee and the State Council, and the whole nation coordinated efforts to advance both the prevention and control of COVID-19 and economic and social development. As a result, the virus was further brought under control. Economic activity restored at a faster pace, with fundamental industries and major products vital to national economy and people's livelihood growing steadily. People's basic livelihood was well protected, and the national economic and social development witnessed overall stability. According to the preliminary estimates, the GDP of China was 20,650.4 billion yuan in the first quarter of 2020, a year-on-year decrease of 6.8% at comparable prices. The value added of the primary industry was 1,018.6 billion yuan, down by 3.2%. That of the secondary industry, 7,363.8 billion yuan, down by 9.6%. And that of the tertiary industry was 12,268 billion yuan, down by 5.2%. First, overall agricultural production was steady and grain production went well. In the first quarter, the value added of agriculture grew by 3.5% year-on-year. With favorable climate conditions in major farming areas, spring plowing and sowing went on smoothly, and winter wheat grew better than last year and average years. By the end of March, the sown area of Grade 1 and Grade 2 seedling of winter wheat accounted for 87.2% of the total, 3.5 percentage points higher than that of the same period last year. In the first quarter, the output of eggs grew by 4.3%, and that of milk grew by 4.6%. The output of pork, beef, mutton, and poultry was 18.13 million tons. The pig production capacity continued to pick up. By the end of the first quarter, 321.2 million pigs were registered in stock, up by 3.5% over the end of the fourth quarter of 2019, among which 33.81 million were breeding sows, up by 9.8%. Second, industrial production dropped, while industry of basic raw materials and high-tech manufacturing maintained growth. In the first quarter, the total value added of the industrial enterprises above the designated size went down by 8.4% year-on-year. Specifically, in March, the total value added of the industrial enterprises above the designated size went down by 1.1% year-on-year, or 12.4 percentage points lower than the decline of the first 2 months, while the month-on-month growth was 32.13%, with the industrial output approaching the level of the same period last year. An analysis by types of ownership showed that the value added of the state-holding enterprises dropped by 6% year-on-year, that of shareholding enterprises down by 8.4%, that of enterprises funded by foreign investors or investors from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan down by 14.5%, and that of private enterprises down by 11.3%. Sector-wise, the value added of mining went down by 1.7%, manufacturing down by 10.2%, and the production and supply of electricity, thermal power, gas, and water down by 5.2%. The production of basic raw materials and new products maintained growth. The output of natural gas, non-woven fabrics, chemical medicine materials, crude oil, 10 kinds of non-ferrous metal, ethylene, and crude steel went up by 9.1, 6.1, 4.5, 2.4, 2.1, 1.3, and 1.2% respectively. The output of automatic vending and ticketing machines, electronic components, integrated circuits, urban rail vehicles, and solar cells went up by 35.3%, 16.2%, 16%, 13.1%, and 3.4% respectively. In March, the high-tech manufacturing went up by 8.9% year-on-year, among which the manufacturing of computers, communication equipment, and other electronic equipment went up by 9.9%. The output of industrial robots and power generation equipment went up by 12.9% and 20% respectively. Third, service production dropped, while emerging service industry continued to expand. In the first quarter, the total value added of the tertiary industry dropped year-on-year, while that of the information transmission, software and information technology services and that of financial intermediation went up by 13.2% and 6% respectively. In March, the index of services production dropped by 9.1%, 3.9 percentage points lower than the decline of the first 2 months. In the first 2 months, the business revenue of service enterprises above the designated size dropped by 12.2%, among which that of Internet and related services and that of software and information technology services went up by 10.1% and 0.7% respectively. In March, the business activity index for services was 51.8%, 21.7 percentage points higher than last month, and even higher for transportation, storage and postal service, retail trades and monetary and financial services, reaching 59.3%, 60.6% and 62.9% respectively. The business activities expectation index for service was 56.8%, 17.1 percentage points higher than February, with competent companies regaining confidence in the markets.
4. Market sales decreased while sales of essentials and online retail sales of physical goods grew fast. In the first quarter, the total retail sales of consumer goods reached 7,858 billion yuan, down by 19% year-on-year. In March, the total retail sales of consumer goods reached 2,645 billion yuan, down by 15.8%. A decline narrowed by 4.7 percentage points compared to in the first 2 months. The retail sales of goods went down by 12%, a decline narrowed by 5.6 percentage points compared with the first 2 months. By locations, urban retail sales in the first quarter reached 6,785.5 billion yuan, down by 19.1%, and rural retail sales was 1,072.5 billion yuan, down by 17.7%. By consumption types, catering revenue was 602.6 billion yuan, down by 44.3%, and retail sales of goods were 7,255.3 billion yuan, down by 15.8%. Goods closely related to daily lives witnessed growth. Food, including grain and cooking oil, beverages, and traditional Chinese and Western medicine by businesses above the designated size grew by 12.6%, 4.1%, and 2.9% respectively, or 2.9%, 1.0%, and 2.7 percentage points higher than the growth in the first 2 months. Online retail sales reached 2,216.9 billion yuan, down by 0.8% year-on-year. Specifically, the online retail sales of physical goods were 1,853.6 billion yuan, up by 5.9%, 2.9 percentage points higher than that of the first 2 months, accounting for 23.6% of the total retail sales of consumer goods, or 2.1 percentage points higher than that of the first 2 months. 5. Investment growth slowed down while e-commerce, professional technical services, and anti-epidemic related industries witnessed growth. In the first quarter, the investment in fixed assets, excluding rural households, reached 8,414.5 billion yuan, down by 16.1% year-on-year, 8.4 percentage points lower than the decline in the first 2 months. Specifically, investment in infrastructure, manufacturing, and real estate development declined by 19.7%, 25.2%, and 7.7% respectively, or 10.6%, 6.3%, and 8.6 percentage points lower than the decline of the first 2 months. The floor space of commercial buildings sold reached 219.78 million square meters, down by 26.3%. And the total sales of commercial buildings were 2,036.5 billion yuan, down by 24.7%. Their decline were narrowed by 13.6 and 11.2 percentage points compared to that of the first 2 months, respectively. By industry, the investment in primary, secondary, and tertiary industries, as well as by private investors, went down by 13.8, 21.9, and 13.5, as well as 18.8% respectively. The decline was narrowed by 11.8, 6.3, 9.5, and 7.6 percentage points respectively. compared to in the first 2 months. The investment in high-tech industry declined by 12.1%, 4.0 percentage points lower than that of the total investment. Of the total, the investment in high-tech manufacturing and high-tech services went down by 13.5% and 9% respectively. Among high-tech manufacturing, investment in manufacturing of computer and office equipment grew by 3.2%. Among high-tech services, investment in e-commerce, professional technical services, commercialization of research findings went up by 39.6%, 36.7%, and 17.4% respectively. Investment in social sectors went down by 8.8%, among which investment in health sector dropped by 0.9%, or 15.2 percentage points lower than the decline of the total investment. Investment in manufacturing of biomedicine and other epidemic-related industries went up. Construction of key projects for outbreak response accelerated. In March, the investment in fixed assets investment grew by 6.05% month-on-month. 6. Import and export of goods slowed down, while trade structure continued to improve. In the first quarter, I believe you've seen the data from China Customs. So I'll skip this part. Surveyed unemployment rate in urban areas dropped slightly while unemployment was generally stable.
In the first quarter, 2.29 million new jobs were created in cities and towns. In March, the surveyed unemployment rate in urban areas was 5.9%, 0.3 percentage points lower than that of February. Specifically, the surveyed unemployment rate of people aged between 25 and 59 was 5.4%, half a percentage point lower than the overall rate in urban areas and 1/5 percentage points lower than that of previous month. The urban surveyed unemployment rate in 31 major cities was 5.7%, same as last month. In March, the employees of enterprises worked averagely 44.8 hours per week, 4.6 hours more than in February. By the end of February, the number of rural migrant workers reached 122.51 million. 9. Residents' nominal income increased while real income decreased, and the per capita disposable income ratio between urban and rural households slightly dropped. In the first quarter, the nationwide per capita disposable income of residents was 8,561 yuan, a nominal increase of 0.8% year-on-year, or a real decrease of 3.9% after deducting price factors. In terms of permanent residents, the per capita disposable income of urban households was 11,691 yuan, a nominal increase of 0.5%, or a real decrease of 3.9%. The per capita disposable income of rural households was 4,641 yuan, a nominal increase of 0.9%, or a real decrease of 4.7%. The nationwide per capita wage income went up by 1.2% year-on-year in nominal terms, net operating income down by 7.3%, net property income up by 2.7%, and net transfer income up by 6.8%. The per capita disposable income of urban households was 2.52 times that of the rural households, 0.01 less than that of the same period last year. The median of the nationwide per capita disposable income was 7,109 yuan, down by 0.7%. Generally speaking, the overall national economic and social development in the first quarter maintained stable despite COVID-19. However, we should also be aware that as COVID-19 hits countries around the world and with mounting downward pressure on the world economy and growing uncertainties, we are now facing heightened pressure from imported infections and some new difficulties and challenges in resuming economic activities and advancing economic and social development. Moving forward, we must fully implement the decisions and measures announced by the CPC Central Committee and the State Council, further coordinate efforts to advance both COVID-19 response and economic and social development, and enhance policies implementation to bring business activity, production, markets, and industries back to normal, and we must ensure and improve people's livelihood, fully restore the order of life and work while continuing to fight COVID-19 so as to ensure a decisive victory in building a moderately prosperous society in all respects and achieving poverty alleviation goals. Well, thank you very much, Director General Mao. Now we will have questions from the press. Please identify your media outlets before raising your questions. Thank you. From CCTV. From the statistics you just released, the economy grew at a visibly slower pace in the first quarter, but in March, the decline was narrowed for most economic indicators. We're facing a very complicated picture abroad economically, so how do you comment on the economic performance in the first quarter, and what is the outlook for the remainder of this year? Thank you. Well, thank you for the question. Well, from the numbers and briefing I just gave you, we can see that the sudden attack of COVID-19 indeed has had a pretty big impact on the economic performance of our country. In the first quarter, major economic indicators declined, but we must also see that in March, for those indicators, there has been a rebound and the decline has been narrowed. That being said, despite the serious impact of COVID-19, our foundational industrial sectors continue to grow, and the medical supplies and the daily necessities are effectively guaranteed, and the livelihoods of the 1.4 billion people are protected, and the society remains generally stable. And I would highlight the following to you. First, in March, major economic indicators visibly improved. As COVID-19 response continued to make progress and economic activity is restored at a faster pace, the major indicators, including industries, services, investment, and imports and exports, have narrowed their declines and are being improved. For instance, companies above designated size reached their height of growth of 8.5% in March last year, and this year it declined by 1.1%, but greatly narrowing compared with January and February by 12.4 percentage points. And industrial output in March, generally speaking, was restored to the same period of last year. Looking at 41 industrial sectors, 19% of them delivered higher value added than January and February in March. 40% of them actually increased year on year. And we looked at over 600 kinds of industrial goods in our statistics. About 40% of them had a positive growth compared to the same period last year. So I will say that indeed economic activity is being restored, and other macro indicators show the same performance. And also employment and prices were generally stable as life and work returned to normal. Employment, I would say, has been generally stable and more jobs are being created. In March, nationwide surveyed unemployment rate in cities and towns was 5.9%, 0.3 percentage points lower than February. And for the age group between 25 and 59, the surveyed unemployment rate was 5.4% or 0.2 percentage points lower than the previous month. So despite the impact of COVID-19, across the nation, there have been no major downsizing, and the employment situation remains stable. And in terms of prices, CPI actually slowed its growth, and month-on-month figures show that in the previous month, CPI grew by 0.8%, but in March, it was down by 1.2%, 0.9 percentage points slower than the previous month. And for the whole quarter, CPI grew by 4.9%, 0.3 percentage points lower than January and February. And I think the cause for this mainly comes from food, including pork prices that have slowed the growth of these prices. A month-on-month increase has also slowed, which shows ample supply of food, which means that across the country, logistics has been quite smooth. And thirdly, industrial upgrading continues to move forward. Throughout our response to COVID-19, the industrial output capacity and the supporting facilities have been brought to full play. Though the COVID-19 was quite serious, our industrial capacity was not affected much, especially for new drivers generated by new forms of industry, etc. We have seen significant improvement. For instance, high-tech sector grew by 8.9% in March, over 20 percentage points higher than the first 2 months of this year. And 3D printing, smartwatch, and continue to unleash huge growing momentum. And e-commerce, online e-learning have all witnessed fast growth. And online physical goods sales grew by 5.9% in March, accounting for 23.6% of total sales nationwide, 5.4 percentage points higher than the same period last year. So from the value added of these sectors, including information transmission, IT services, and software, the value added grew by 13.2%, driving GDP growth by 0.6 percentage points. So although the COVID-19 was quite serious, these new drivers continue to expand. And they are expanding fast. And it continues to be the case. And also poverty alleviation continues to move forward. This is something of a high priority for the central authorities. The first quarter, 139.6 billion yuan was allocated for poverty alleviation. Over 220,000 projects for poverty alleviation were launched, and for seriously poverty-stricken areas like Tibet, Qinghai, and Guizhou, per capita disposable income grew by 9.6%, 4.8%, and 3.1% year-on-year, significantly higher than the national average. And fifth, let me say that the rebound will continue. So to answer your questions just now, how do we assess the situation? I would say that you have to look at the major indicators. For instance, power consumption. The decline has visibly narrowed than the first 2 months of this year in March. And power generation has leveled off and entered positive territory. And power consumption started to grow again. For my bureau, for projects with over 500 million yuan of investment, we had over 11,000 of these projects, so up by 1.14% year-on-year. And also dugging machines, the sales went up by 11.6%. These are all some good news to share, and also according to China Customs, imports and exports visibly improved in March. And in the 3 sections of March, the section-by-section increase continues to accelerate. So we expect imports and exports in early April to further improve than in March. In particular, we previously announced several policies and measures to help support the companies restore economic activity, and these efforts are working and paying off. And moving forward, in light of the evolving situation, we will continue to adopt more such measures. Rebound and improvement and positive trend in March will continue. Thank you. With South China Morning Post. Statistics in the first quarter show that there has been a quite big impact from COVID-19 on China's economy. Do you think that the second quarter will become a turning point for China's economy this year? Will the government consider not having a specific GDP increase target? According to IMF, China's economy will grow by 1.2% only this year. What's your comments on that?
You asked 3 questions in total. Let me pick up on the first and the third. The latest IMF forecast. In light of the recent global epidemic situation and global economic outlook, revised downward its global economic forecast. China's forecast was adjusted down to 1.2%. To my knowledge, is one of the few major economies that would remain in the positive territory. IMF also forecasted that in 2021, China will have a 9.2% growth. So my understanding is, if we calculate the number for the coming 2 years altogether, it will be an average of more than 5% growth. And if in 2021, world economy returns to normal, the subdued potential will further release in the second year. You also asked if second quarter will be a turning point for Chinese economy. From the data we have right now, the March data was much better than in the first 2 months. And in March, the improving momentum is expected to continue as work and production gets back to normal at a quicker pace with a lot of strong supporting policies. I expect the performance in second quarter will be much better than in Q1. If the global epidemic situation was effectively contained, the future economic performance of the world will be much better as well. On setting economic targets, our tradition is to announce the economic forecast targets during the 2 sessions in the government work report. This year, to effectively contain the spread of the virus, we have delayed the 2 sessions this year, so we do not have quite the answer right now.
Well, thank you for your question. These are two excellent questions. Regarding the first question, indeed, as economic activity is being restored, logistics cost will rise and there will be fewer orders. These are difficulties that the companies actually face. So let me first of all say that for companies above designated size, almost 100% of these companies have resumed production. And for smaller companies, generally speaking, more than 80% of them have restored production. So on this front, we're seeing pretty good progress. And you see, as the order of life and work returns to normal, logistics cost is actually declining, and there are smoother channels for logistics. But indeed, the external situation is becoming more complicated, and the domestic demand remains weak. So indeed, there has been a shortage of demand and a decline in new orders, and the companies do face some difficulties. To address those difficulties, the government adopted some policies and measures to help support the companies tide over those difficulties, and further adopt tax and fee cuts to reduce the cost for companies in doing business, including deferring and reducing payment of social security, and also increase funding or financial support for companies to address these difficulties. Moving forward, I think we will intensify such measures because indeed we're facing a quite complicated picture and a lot of uncertainties, and the companies are in a quite difficult situation. So we need to step up those support measures. And as for your second question, while consumer goods retail sales continues to increase, actually the total size of sales in the first quarter dropped, but in March, because of the restoration of commercial and economic activities, the decline visibly narrowed. Then the first 2 months, well, moving forward with the unleash of previously pent-up demand and consumption, we expect the consumption to rebound. And as for the consumption vouchers you mentioned, indeed, in some countries and regions, they are carrying out such practices, and for some places in China, including Jiangsu, consumption vouchers have been quite helpful, I would say, for expanding market and increasing demand. Thank you. Thank you. With CNBC. The GDP growth was in the negative territory in first quarter. Is this a result of the global spread of COVID-19? And has it had an impact on online shopping through video link? And what are the challenges facing China's employment? And in March and April, what are the specific numbers, or what's the situation like in these 2 months?
Well, that's a lot of questions. Would you repeat your first question? My first question is, do you have a specific assessment of the impact of the global spread of the virus on China's economic performance? You actually asked 4 questions in total. Let me give an overview. The impact on Q1 data was substantial, but the specific impact is difficult to calculate because some are short-term, some are long-term, some are temporary, some are lasting. In the very beginning, it may affect the Chinese economy had a big impact, but later China's economy is resilient and has a strong rebound. Your second question is about online selling promotions of products. For the next step, China needs to expand domestic demand while stabilizing export. That means we need to increase effective investment and at the same time release consumption potential. China has great consumption potential despite the impact of the COVID-19 on travels. Consumption using new forms of promotion may pick up speed. For example, internet-enabled promotion platforms will be more widely used. The subdued consumption potential, in our view, will have a strong upturn. And in the future, the economic growth will take on an even stronger momentum. Unemployment. From the data I shared, you would see that employment was generally stable. The surveyed unemployment rate in March its decrease narrowed by 0.3% over the first 2 months and 0.2% lower than in February. But there has been a lot of pressure with decreasing orders of businesses. There will be a great pressure on employment. And migrant workers, college and university graduates will find it very more difficult to find jobs. But we've put job creation first, rolled out a number of policies. We try to keep employment stable by supporting businesses. We will also provide targeted support to key groups of people, such as migrant workers, by providing better training opportunities, helping them return to their hometown and start up small businesses. We will also promote innovation and entrepreneurship. With greater policy support, employment will be stable. Your fourth question is about the numbers in March and April. I've just shared the data in March. It showed a clear trend of improvement, and I believe the momentum in April will continue. In Q1, primary sector value added dropped by 3.2%. What is the cause of that? Is it because of sluggish agricultural growth? Do you think there's a need to stock on grains?
I think the decline in value added in the primary sector is a result mainly of husbandry industry due to the swine plague. We have seen a year-on-year decrease of 9.1% in the first quarter, and due to the COVID-19, for pork, poultry, mutton, and beef, the livestock production was impacted and down by 10.5%, and actually husbandry industry accounts for 45% of the primary sector, so that has resulted in the decline in value added in this sector. And grain production, as I said, is going well. The current circumstances show that spring plowing and sowing is being move forward in a smooth way, not much affected by COVID-19. And winter wheat is also growing well. According to our survey, the major agricultural provinces intend to sow in more areas of land this year, changing or reversing the trend of decline in previous years. So taking all of these into account and also the favorable agricultural conditions, we think we can expect a good foundation for a bumper harvest this year. And food prices, I also want to emphasize, have remained stable. In the past 5 years, grain output exceeded 1.3 trillion jin, or 6,500 billion kilos. And we have ample stock. So from food supply and demand, I would say that despite the COVID-19, food prices have remained generally stable. Even for Wuhan and other hardest hit areas, there have not been major fluctuations in food prices. And the first quarter year-on-year increase of food prices was 0.6%, and month-on-month wise, it remained the same. So we are quite resilient in terms of the supply of food. So to hold the bowl, the rice bowl, firmly in our hands, so to speak, or to ensure our own food supply, I don't see any problem with that. And about pork and husbandry industry, including hogs, it's being restored as well, with life and work returning to normal. And plus the government policies to promote pig production, we are seeing improved pig production at a faster pace. In the first quarter, pork production increased by 3.5% year-on-year, with breeding sows up by 9.8%. So animal husbandry industry is improving. Thank you. With the Financial Times, I have 2 questions. First, economic decline in the first quarter, will this affect your efforts to achieve the goal of a moderately prosperous society? Will it double the income, per capita income, compared with 2010? And also, some economists mention the concept of relative economic growth. Do you think we should give up on the current or previously set economic target?
Your first question is on how do we evaluate the economic decline in Q1? It's a 6.8% decline. We must take a fair view of the economic data for the first quarter. We should not compare oversimplistically compare the data in Q1 with previous years. First, we believe we must take into full account the serious impact of the COVID-19. COVID-19 has been a fastly spreading, widely affecting, and most difficult public health emergencies since the founding of the People's Republic. Since it happened, the party central leadership and the government has put people's life first by taking robust measures. The spread of the virus has been effectively contained within a relatively short period of time. Millions of Chinese people have been able to not been infected because of these containment measures. But it also affects China's economy. And we also need to take into account the global impact. It is now spreading in hundreds of countries. global goods and flow, a global goods flow and flow of personnel dropped significantly. China cannot stay unaffected. And third, we must be fully aware of China's advantages with its existing industrial system. China has a strong capacity in supporting industrial production. Some industries, instead of being affected by COVID-19, have consolidated their growth capacity. China's industrial system hasn't been affected substantially. Its structure and capacity may even be improved during the epidemic control period. And fourth, we must recognize that the lasting improving momentum has stayed unchanged. The COVID-19 is a public health emergency. The fundamentals supporting China's long-term economic growth has not changed. China has a large market. It's growing rapidly. It has great potential. These basic features will not change. And on factors of production, China has a strong industrial system with strong supporting capacity with a lot of human resources. And its logistics and transportation facilities are highly efficient. These are the strong underpinning for China's economic growth. China is also deepening reform and opening wider to spur domestic drivers of growth. Take that into account. China's long-term growth momentum will not be affected by the short-term impact of the COVID-19. So the 6.8% decline must be taken into perspective. This is my observation. The second question on completing the building of moderately prosperous society in all respects, it was first raised during the 18th Party National Congress. After years of efforts, China has basically attained goals. But the biggest weak link is poverty alleviation. That's why a lot of efforts have been put on eradicating absolute poverty. We're seeing very robust policy support to lift the remaining impoverished population out of poverty. That will mean that the moderately prosperous society will be a better quality one, and people will be more satisfied. On your question about relative economic growth, I don't quite get it. Maybe China has had rather better forecast in the IMF outlook, but the COVID-19 is affecting all countries. This shows that the planet Earth is a global village, and people live in a community with a shared future. COVID-19 affects us all. There is a need to step up international cooperation to contain the spread of the virus within a short period of time while finding curables and solutions to get global growth back to normal. Thank you. In the interest of time, we'll leave the last two questions to one Chinese journalist and one foreign journalist.
Well, that is a pretty challenging question. From all the figures I just provided, indeed, in the first quarter, COVID-19 did have a serious impact, but in March, there were major signs of improvement, as the figures can show. I think the biggest difficulty, domestically speaking, is about helping the companies. We need to adopt a more tailored approach to assisting the companies, including tax and fee cuts, reducing the cost, etc., to maintain the livelihood of those businesses is essential for keeping employment stable and economic performance stable. And globally speaking, I think in such a difficult time, it is all the more important for all countries to step up cooperation, especially in fighting COVID-19, so that we can reduce the impact on people's lives and health. And with good progress in COVID-19 response, we can accelerate the restoring of economic activity and for things to go back to normal. Thank you. We see a big drop in consumption in the first quarter, but online sales remained resilient. How do you foresee online sales potential continue to increase? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. From the fourth quarter data, see consumption has been pent up because people can't go out and cannot shop. But as life gets back to normal, the subdued consumption will have a resurgence. And second, although consumption has been affected, we need to be aware of the tremendous potential of consumption in China. And the sound and steady growth of Chinese economy will depend largely on domestic consumption, given our large potential. In consumption, we assess consumption capability and consumption willingness. And in assessing consumption, we need to take into account people's property, savings, their monthly income. So the temporary COVID-19 will have an impact on people's consumption willingness, but with the resumption of work and production, people will be more willing to shop. Our people have a strong aspiration for a better life, and consumption growth is an unstoppable trend. With greater social security, wider coverage, China's domestic consumption has great potential, and in the future we will further release such potential with more policies. Lately, 23 central government ministries has released a joint document on facilitating consumption. And second, internet-enabled consumption will take a more prominent role, and online sales of consumer goods will pick up speed. This is a trend that we observed. You may know that I have just been back from Wuhan. We've been through very tough moments in combating the virus, but I believe after this, the Chinese people will have the ability, confidence, and strength to overcome difficulties, whatever form it may take. Director General Mao just shared with us China's economic performance while emphasizing that we must take a fair, comprehensive, and integrated view of China's economic performance because Chinese economy is able and will turn the challenges into opportunities. If you have more questions concerning China's economy, please do feel free to bring it up to us. We will provide better information disclosure services for you. This is the end of today's news briefing. Thank you.